because you were angry, that also was true. And you were like, oh, did you see this? Look at my children. Look at my hands. Right? And the argument on social media starts, and it's out there. And once it is out there, for those of us who are trying to be journalists, it's really, really difficult to put that on. So that's what we're going to talk about today. This age of misinformation. How all this stuff gets out there now, because the technology makes it so easy. And how we read this small little radio station in Ann Arbor that tries to cover the whole state of Michigan. How do we keep fact-based information and journalism to our audience? How do we create a newsroom where folks like yourself can listen to it and go to our website and believe what we're saying? Have you made sure? They're supposed to Congress who don't think they're doing a good job. So do we have questions about that? We'll understand those at the end of our remarks. As I said earlier, I'm just like having a news director at the station. So my job is to coordinate and work with the 60 or so reporters that we have around the city to cover the news that we do. Oh, there we go. That's right. There we are. Okay. So, here's where you can see it. Actually, all around it. So we've got 3 towers, and you can see with the smaller one as well. Our job is to cover the whole city. And so that's what we're trying to do. We've got reporters in Grand Rapids, and reporters in this place. We've got one in the Smith area, and the rest of it is all the parts in Ann Arbor. And we're gatekeepers, right? We're trying to decide on the data state. What is the most important thing that we need to do? And one of the things that we think about is important to the whole state of Michigan. So we don't cover the day-to-day happenings at the local community. And we don't cover things that are very, very local. So like we're in Ann Arbor, but if an Ann Arbor city council member might complain to us, hey, how come you're not covering my rate? And the answer would be, if we're covering your rate, you probably look at something that you didn't want to do. But the whole state decided your city council rate. So if we cover a story in Detroit, we have to take the local folks in Holland and find that story interesting. If we cover a story from here, the folks in Flint find that story interesting. That's because of the audience umbrella that we have to worry about. All those people are listening on their radio, right? And the citizen crowd here, and me as well, we are with an age where we are still listening to news on the radio. Our research says if you're over 50, you're probably listening to us on the radio. If you are under 50, you're my daughter 50, you don't see us on the radio. This is where you get all of your information, right? So we have really 2 different audiences. There's the radio audience that we broadcast to, and then there's our digital audience. They're getting your news off their phone, off our website, they're listening to our podcast, they're following our Twitter feed. They're never hearing us on the radio, but they're fans of NPR. It's just a different way that they consume their content. But it makes it more of a challenge for us to reach those audiences and to make sure that what we're doing is factual. So on either platform, doesn't matter whether you're listening to us on the radio or you're reading about something on our website, you're doing it. Our mission and our ethical journalism is the same. So I won't read this to you. You're all students of you can read. But we take this very, very seriously. Right? Our job is to uncover facts and share those stories. Right? So we need to make sure that the facts that we are sharing are actually true. And that's becoming more and more difficult in the last days. There's so much information out there. And to be honest, there are people who are intentionally working to misinform us towards false information. Because it's very common. So there are all sorts of different organizations that journalism ethics provide customer service to, RTDNA has ethics. There's numerous places for journalism ethics. So they all really come down to yes, it's right. Do your job without feeling favor. Don't play favorites. Be as objective as you can. I think the whole course on the project is be fair in the journalism that you're presenting well, it's super fake news because nobody died listens to the radio anymore. So that's a fun picture. So, journalism, the press, is the only profession mentioned in the protection in the First Amendment. There are 5 protections in the First Amendment, but freedom of press, Congress will make no law. There's no freedom of press. Private Congress thought it was that important that citizens be informed. Their belief was, and I agree, that we can't have democracy if you don't have a well-informed vote. You know what they're doing, what they're voting for, and what the actions they vote to do. So what did we do? Well, we informed the public. Everything from consideration for him of the money, right? That's pretty basic safety information, to a conversation about what insurance might mean for the auto industry and what that might mean for business economy. So you basic stuff, this is more complicated. Our job is also to hold Congress to account. And we talked a little bit earlier about our Congress doesn't want it. And that was a situation where our station led the way in the state discrimination rules on that issue. And there were powerful people in Alaska who were really screaming. They didn't want that information out there. But you're talking to people like holding power to account. Watch the public debate. That is all over the place. And public radio, we want to make sure that we're doing it in a safe space. And I'm not saying that like safe space in a vote. The safe space, so they're not yelling. They're not arguing over each other. Hopefully, when we look for a safety, you're constituted to agree and constituted to disagree with. So if you hear them being presented in a calm, rational way, and you're not just being entertained by 2 people who are throwing things and arrows at each other on an easy economic version. Promote transparency. This is more difficult to do than you might realize. You have this is one of 2 states in the country where you cannot FOIA. That's called Freedom of Information Act. We can't FOIA the government or the legislature. In Michigan, and our jurisdiction on that. In any other state, go back to those water crises. If you wanted to know what was going to happen or what communication was in the government office about that, you would file a Freedom of Information Act request. There's a delay, they may try to claim. Eventually, you could demand those requests from the government office or the legislature. In Michigan, you can't do that. So that makes it even more difficult for us. But we believe that open government is the best form of government, and seeing what's going on, that's the best form of democracy. Strengthening civil society, that's giving people the opportunity to talk about things. And then protect human rights. And there are actors out there who do bad things. And sometimes those bad things will continue until they're brought to light. So that's also the power of that. So we do that. Here's a example of many of the stories that we've done. I would see some state stories. And so, not safety directly, not mentioning the water crisis. Believe, which is a 9-part podcast on the very after our survival. We just had an election, so we did one of the votes. It was a podcast that was designed for Gen Z, young people, to talk about the issues that were important to them and what they thought was important to the election. We do a lot of environmental stuff. So Rebecca and Rusty Graham did a documentary on the bird dimension and what we can learn about how climate is changing and what's happening to the birds and how that might affect us as human stories. So, big stories. We cover lots of big stories. We also cover stuff every day. These are all 2 stories from last Friday. I'm a James from last Friday. I made a very significant video that's on our CGI program. That's here in the federal funding. We've also those who claim that they have $390 million to the Department of Human Services. This is an interesting one because that happened last Friday. Nobody at NBA exec still looks about what the cuts are and how that might affect residents of the state of Michigan. You know, when I go to Toronto, I guess they do it too. So when we're presenting that as factual information, we have to write that very carefully. Right? We have to say, here's what we know, here's how we found that out, here's what the information came from, and also importantly, here's what we do not know. So with that story, what do we know? We know that shows produce a list, and in that list, they have what they claim are $390 million of cuts. State level savings the money that they send to the Michigan Department of Human Services. And it's a long list. We also have to say with the story that those have done this with their list a number of times before, and the information has turned out to be incorrect. Sometimes they are cutting stuff that is already been cut. Sometimes they are putting this as a program that no longer exists anymore. Sometimes they're just making math errors. That's what they're putting together. So what do we do? Well, we call them and we say, hey, walk us through this list, can you? Show us what's right, what's wrong, so we can give an accurate presentation to our public. If they don't talk to us, if they're told, and he's not giving out any information, then we have to share that. So there's also the activities that we take place to try to make sure that we're as correct as possible. And how on a daily basis in our meetings. Now, we can work as hard as we want. Don't feel no trouble. And it's getting worse. Right? This is a look at the number of people who say they trust, or mostly trust, Duffy, however you want to define that, in the United States. Right? And you can see it's not moving well. There was a jump in 2016, 2017. Whether that was related to the first one or the third one, I don't know. But you can see where the trend is. It's not going well. And that's a hard turn, right? We don't trust this. What are we doing? What are we doing before? It gets interesting when we look at it by political parties. Right? So that blue line, the blue line is that's if you're a Democrat. 54% of Democrats. Yes. Independents, 27%. And Republicans, only 12%. According to these polls. Well, some of that may be because fair enough of the media that people who say they themselves are Republicans conclude that they want to listen to you also frequently tell you that all the other media is wrong. You can only trust us. Only we have it right.
That turned out not to be true. Anybody who was worried about the water in Flint can just relax. Relax. Also turned out not to be true. All right? This one at the bottom, there's a little story behind that. One of the rare times that we had to issue a correction on our station. Tom Izzo has been hired by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Well, fortunately for Michigan State University, that did not happen. But I'll tell you how that got on the air, and it's a misinformation story. There was a television reporter from Detroit. I won't name him because he's not here to defend himself, but he was standing outside a team meeting. And there was lots of talk about whether or not Izzo was going to sign with the Cavaliers that year. And there was some discussion that happened from the players on their way out. And he guessed by what they heard in the discussion that it had happened, that Izzo had just told the team that he was going to go to the Cavs. So he tweets it out. Tom Izzo's going to go to the Cavaliers. So we saw that tweet in our newsroom. We're like, oh, okay, if this is true, this is news. But we can't confirm it. We do not put anything on the air that we can't confirm. And there's also this thing in journalism called double sourcing. Right? There's an old joke that says, if your mom says she loves you, get a second source. Right? That's how you need it in journalism. So we were making calls. The public relations office at MSU were like, we don't know what you're talking about. Sometimes they say that when they don't know what they're talking about. Sometimes they say that when they don't have anything to say yet. Of course, the athletic department had nothing to say. Izzo wasn't answering his phone. We have somebody who has his phone. And but about 20 minutes later, the other television station in Detroit tweets out, reports Tom Izzo going to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So a reporter comes in, it's double sourced. This station is reporting it, and this station is reporting it. And our editing process didn't work correctly, and because people were very, very excited about this news, and it got on the air. It got on the air once. As soon as it was heard on the air, it was like, wait a minute, here's what happened. That first reporter was wrong. The second reporter saw that tweet and tweeted out the wrong information. Right? And then we had a reporter in our newsroom who thought, oh, look, two sources. Let's put it on the air. And then we had to run that correction. We had egg on our face that day because we trusted the two-source rule. But it was just an example of how fast that misinformation can travel, even when it's wrong. And we're trying to do the best journalism that we can, but we can still get it out there incorrectly. Stuff is real easy to make, folks. Look at that, right off the TV. There was a news director who was spreading fake news. This took me 20 seconds to make. Now, I work with this stuff a little bit more than you do, so it might take you 20 minutes. But I can make that in 20 seconds and post it. And people who want to believe it, folks who are Duffy haters, they can spread that around. Ha, he finally got his! And around it goes. And it could take us days to try to convince everybody, yeah, this is just, somebody just made this up. This is actually not true. And as I said earlier, the people who really like me and the people who really don't like me are the people who are most likely to spread it around because it hits them emotionally. And so they share it, and around it goes. But it's that easy to throw garbage out into the journalism sphere. I just made that word up. So, as I say, anybody can be a journalist. And there's lots of the different factors that contribute to this misinformation that you're seeing online. Some of it is the algorithms, right? You know, probably, that Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever social media platform you may be on, if you like something, they're going to give you more of it, right? So if you're into martial arts, you're going to see a lot of martial arts stuff on your Instagram and Twitter feeds. If you're not, you probably don't see any of it, right? If you are a fan of this politician, or you really dislike that politician, and when something comes up that's for or against those individuals, and you watch that whole video, the algorithm says, we held their attention for 90 seconds. We're going to send them more of that because they want your eyeballs, right? The computers are figuring out what you like and giving you more of it. If you are really concerned about environmental news, you're going to see that. If you don't care, if every time something environmental comes up, you're like, where's the sports? You're not going to see it. They're not going to give it back to you. Confirmation bias. We talked a little bit about that, right? Everybody who applauded when I said Governor Whitmer was going to run for president. That's confirmation bias. You're like, yes! And it's something that you already want, something that you already believe. Might not be true, but if it's something that you've been prone to believe before, you're going to share it. Lack of media literacy. I know among this age group, it's probably popular to say, these kids today, right? Look at them, they just don't know anything. They have no common sense, right? How could they believe this? But it goes across the ages. We are guilty too. A lot of folks might not realize that you can make a fake post that makes it look like it's live TV in 20 seconds and share it around. Folks, you can't blame people for this, but a lot of people just don't know how the media works. We get this sometimes when there's an exciting, engaging story out there, and people are like, why haven't you covered that yet? And it's because we can't confirm it. But people think that we're doing it because we're biased. Oh, that's just news they don't want to share. They don't like that news, so they're not going to share it. What we're doing is actually working very hard to try to confirm it because we're not going to send it out if we don't know that it's factual. But that you might not, if you don't know how journalism works, there's a media literacy problem there, and you just don't know what's going on there. And then economic incentives. This comes back to the algorithms, right? There are companies that are creating exhilarating, anger-filled, wrong sometimes headlines just because they want you to click, right? They make money every time you click because then the ads pop up and you see the ads. So, King Charles on deathbed, right? That people are more likely to click on that headline than King Charles has returned to the hospital for tests, right? So if that's what happened, if King Charles has gone back to the hospital for tests, that's what a responsible news organization would write. But if you make your money by the number of people that click on your stories, King Charles on deathbed, that's the one that you're going to click, or that's the one that most people are going to click. And so there's an economic incentive to play with this, to try to get you emotionally engaged and sometimes feed you wrong information. So what are the consequences of that? Well, we saw the one, right? Erode public trust. People don't trust us anymore. That is part blamed on technology. It is part blamed on politicians who, since the beginning of media, have loved to rail against the media. And it's partly our own fault. We are not blameless in this. The press has made mistakes as well. And people remember that. And so it has eroded the trust. It can harm public health, right? You've heard about the measles outbreak in Texas. Some people are calling them freedom freckles. There's a large group of Texans who believe that the MMR vaccine is not of any use. There may be some people who believe that here. I'm going to disagree with you, but I can respect your opinion. But it has public health consequences when there's misinformation that's out there. It can influence elections, right? The Russians and other actors are not hiring troll farms for giggles, right? There are people in foreign countries who are paid to flood our social media with misinformation that they hope you will share, that they hope will run the narrative so that they can influence our elections, one way or the other. They may not even care who was elected. All they want to do is stir the pot. They just want to create, if they can make us all angry at each other, if they can divide us, if they can take the center and put us into two camps where we just can't work together, the country doesn't work well, and they're winning, or at least accomplishing their goal. We can define what winning means. But it can influence elections, and then it can incite violence, right? Misinformation at a demonstration or a crowd level, misinformation can incite violence, all the way up to convincing a bunch of people that they need to kidnap the government, right? Somewhere in between is where most of that fits. But bad information can create bad situations. And if we in the media share that bad information, we are in part responsible for the bad situations that come up from that. So what's our pledge at Michigan Public? Not the one where you give us money, but our pledge to you. We work to debunk disinformation, right? We don't stand for it. If we know that something's wrong and we can prove it, we report that as well. Now here's where it gets complicated. The research suggests that just repeating the lie can inform people about the lie, right? Because they're like, I'm not sure where I heard this, but didn't I hear? So what we do, if we're going to tell you something is wrong, we sandwich it, and the research that suggests that this nulls that. So we will say, what Vincent Duffy just said is wrong, and here's what he said, blah, 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 and a reminder, that's wrong. Right? So we sandwich it that way so that there's no confusion, and then we'll back up what evidence or research we have that demonstrates that whoever's speaking is incorrect. Some stuff we just can't know, right? Like the MDHHS cuts. We don't know. It's out there. There are probably some cuts. It may not be $390 million. We don't know what programs they're going after. We will keep on that story, but we just don't know. And then we operate locally, right? We're Michigan Public. So there's lots of international misinformation that's out there. There's lots of national information that's out there. We don't have a lot of Greenlanders in Michigan, so we're not really focused on that story, right? We do have a very large Arab American community in Michigan, so the Middle Eastern stories that are happening, we're more likely to cover than something that might happen, say, in Greenland or Panama, because we're focused on Michigan. So I'm the news director. I get to make all the rules. I get to spout what the ethics are and what the policies are and to make this so. But Rebecca has to do it. She's the firewall that makes sure that the misinformation doesn't get through. So I'm going to have her explain to you how we do that. Thanks.
Thank you. How do I
Just that.
Okay. Hello. So as you've heard, I'm a senior editor in the newsroom. For 18 years, I was a reporter and a producer at Michigan, what was then called Michigan Radio before we rebranded. And I was also, for 10 of those years, host of the Environment Report. So my background is, I have a science background, and I got a degree from U of M, and then I got into journalism. So I have a background in fact-checking as a reporter, and this is our reporting process, as you can see here. But before I get into that, the way that I like to describe my job, I think back to when my kids were little, and my younger son had his first day of preschool. And he got a report from his teacher, and the report said, Max had a great first day. And I was talking about this in the car, and my older son, who was 8 at the time, said, how do you know that? I want to see this report. And so that's what we always want to do. We always want to see the original source material. And we do that by checking primary documents. So PACER is a system where you can see legal documents. We always look at the original scientific papers. We check medical records. If, for example, we are interviewing somebody who served in the Army, we want to ask to see their paper. So we really do a deep dive on sources to make sure that even though we trust what they're saying, we have to verify that what they're saying is true. As Vince mentioned, double sourcing is really important, and so we can't just go with one confirmation of a topic or a subject. Our anonymous source policy is another thing that is really we hold to a pretty high standard, and Vince has to be the one who will approve using anonymous sources. And so that's really only used in the case of somebody being afraid that they could lose their job, they could be in fear of their physical safety. And in that case, we prefer to use their middle name if we can, just their first name, then their middle name, then completely anonymous. We're very discerning about when we use that. This is a screenshot of our system that's called NewsBoss. And our software is how we edit our stories that go on the radio. And so, for example, you can see that there are sections up here that are in all caps. And these are the parts of the story that I, as an editor, have made changes. And then I talk to the reporter, and we go through this process, and we have a discussion. And we say, well, okay, first of all, is it accurate? Secondly, we want the fewest, most powerful words. And that's because that's how people really take in information on the radio. And then we walk through this process, we have a discussion. I will fact check everything in the byte as well. So the byte is the clip from the source. And as Vince described, if we decide, okay, we're going to put something that a politician said on the air, but there's some element of it that is not correct, we will sandwich it. And so that we're very clear with the audience, okay, what you're going to hear is not correct, but this is what this politician said. And then we come out of that again and say, again, that was wrong. And as part of our process, as I mentioned, we check lots of details. We check names, we check titles, we check ages, what an interviewee says in the soundbite, and we always check math really, really carefully. One of the most common mistakes that reporters make is with math. And then we've described this part already. This part's going to be kind of short, but that's all right. Vince covered some of this already. This is also, for you to see, this is our corrections process. So when we do make a mistake, we want to be really transparent about that. And what we do is we put a note at the bottom of the web story, the online story, and say, here's what a previous version of the story said. We made a mistake. Here's the correct information. The story's been corrected above. We also put a correction on air, so that if you heard something in a newscast at 5 o'clock, we want to come back to you the next day at that same time and say, here, we made a mistake. Here's the correct information. And that was my portion. And now, here's Christa.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for letting us come here and see your faces, because I can tell you, from being in broadcast television for so many years, it's a treat to be able to be connected with the community that we serve. And it doesn't happen often for us, and especially in my job, where I get checks that come in across my desk every single day, and every single gift that we receive, I want to reach out personally and say thank you. And fortunately, I'm one person and don't have that kind of time, and that's a good problem to have, but it is such a gift for us to be able to come and be with you so that we can hear from you as well, which I won't talk too long because I do want to make sure that I'm sure you have lots of questions. But, never in my job as a fundraiser for Michigan Public did I think that how I fundraise and how we fundraise as an organization would be called into question as far as factual. And yet here we are. So I want to just start by saying a few of the generals about how we at Michigan Public are funded. You can see this little graphic here that we have the bulk of our funding is from individuals just like you, our members and our individual donors. We have, of course, an endowment, so we have a little bit coming from that. that we have had donors seed and that we have kicked into as well. Corporate sponsorships, so those are the messages you hear. Support for Michigan Public comes from, and various companies across the state of Michigan are supporting us. And they are not running commercials, by the way. These are support messages. And as a thank you for sponsoring us, we read the name of the organization, we tell what they do, we tell where you can find more information. And pretty much that's all we're allowed to say, because otherwise it turns into a commercial, and we are not commercial broadcasters. We have, finally, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting does fund a part of what we do at Michigan Public. And recently, as of last week, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the head of NPR and PBS were called in front of Congress because Congress funds the CPB. And so what they'd like to do is defund the CPB, which in turn would defund what we receive from the CPB. So again, look at that, 6.5% of our total funding comes from CPB. So in short, yes, we do need to make up that funding at some point, and we have plans to do that, but we're going to be okay. And you know, I think when you think of people who fund nonprofits, fund organizations, charitable givers, you know, they just will make it happen so that we will be able to continue to do what we do, and being connected and staying present, and of course, with these fabulous journalists, how can we not continue to fund that? Okay, there we go. So a little bit about the CPB, and again, my knowledge isn't giant on this, but I just wanted to show you kind of this little pie of what they support. And you can see that that little in the lower left-hand corner, the yellow square, or the yellow triangle, is the radio stations. So their funding itself is funding a very small amount of their funding goes to the public radio stations. So how did the donors support us at Michigan Public? Membership. What is a sustainer anyway? So we kind of toy with, do we say that on the air a lot? Because some people don't understand what that means. And basically a sustaining member is somebody who gives a certain amount of money every month. They're a member, they get a tote bag, because we're NPR, we give tote bags, or a coffee mug during our pledge drives, and I'll get to that in just a minute. So that's a sustainer. Fund drives, we call them fund drives, pledge drives interchangeably, but they're fun, right?
Oh yeah.
258-9866. There we go. Okay. So yeah, we just finished our spring drive, and I will tell you that if you do not like listening to our fund drives on the air, first of all, you're not alone. Second of all, you have a whole 6 months before the next one. I'll just tell you that. We do 3 large drives a year, and there's the fall, that's in September. We do one, of course, toward the end of the calendar year, usually around the holidays, or around the Thanksgiving holiday, and then we do our spring drive. And the goal of our drives isn't just for funding what we do, but it's also to get new members like yourselves and new members like your children. Trying to get younger people into our audience so that they become sustainers and help continue to sustain us long into the future. Of course, there's individual giving, individual major donors who can give very easily through IRAs or DAF, which is a donor advised fund. Those are becoming very popular right now. Planned giving bequests, and let me tell you, not an easy conversation to have with an individual. Hi, when you die, would you please leave us your money? But there is a way to do it. And so people will leave us in their legacy plans, and those that can pay income while they're living, charitable gift annuities and charitable remainder trusts. And pretty much we partner, now I don't know if you mentioned this, but the University of Michigan holds Michigan Public's broadcast license. I'm sure you've heard that at the end of some of our news stories that we've done about the University of Michigan. It doesn't mean that they have any control about what we say on the air. It's just they hold our broadcast license. So technically we're employees of the University of Michigan, but that's about it. But we do have really great resources within the Office of the University of Development, and that helps me do my job better because we've got a wonderful plan giving office who advises me on all the things that have to do with estate planning that I'm not an estate planner, and I'm not an attorney, so I don't really understand all the different language and all the different ways of charitable giving through your legacy planning, but they're there to help us out. So, I think, yes, that's the end of my presentation. Here's the thing. I have 2 clipboards on either side of the stage. If you would like to stay in contact, if you would like more information about what we do, if you want to become a member if you want to have our newsletters sent to your inbox, please put your contact information on one of these clipboards. I have business cards there too. Take one of those, send me an email. The phone number on there is my personal cell phone number because I was lazy and never got a Zoom phone when they were being offered, so it's my personal cell phone number. But we're happy to answer your questions. You know, we, as journalists, you know, I spent, like I said, many, many years in television broadcast journalism. I've walked in many newsrooms across the country, big markets and small, and I have never walked through a newsroom like I do at Michigan Public with the pride of the intelligence and the integrity that our journalists put into their work. And I'm so honored to be a part of this team. And it's probably the highlight of my career to be fundraising for something that I personally believe in as well. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of our community and inviting us here to come and talk to you. And I think we'll take some questions because I know that you have some.
This is like a reverse press conference.
In your fact-checking process, has AI been of value to you?
Is what?
AI?
Yeah, that's a good question. No. But not yet, right? So AI is getting better and better. But ask AI a question about something that you know a lot about and really, really well, and you'll see that it comes up with some errors. And what AI does is it goes out and looks at everything that it can find, and it does it a whole lot faster than we can, and then it comes together. I mean, I could have asked AI to write my speech today. I didn't, but you could even say, give me a 5-minute speech, maybe I should have said it that way, or give me a speech, and it spits it out. We could ask AI to give us, the history of something, but it's only as good. I mean, you've heard like the computer folks say, garbage in, garbage out. It's only as good as the data it finds, and so we would not use AI. We could Google stuff and use AI to try to fact check something, but we're not going to rely on AI as the definitive source. That's like relying on Wikipedia. It's probably right, but you can't be certain.
I will say that in my job, I use it very, very sparingly, and here's how I use it, is that if I have a conversation with somebody and I want to remember everything, I kind of open up my notes app on my phone, and right when I finish the conversation, I will dictate everything I remember from the conversation. And then when I have time, when I get home, when I get back to the office, I will ask it to please make these look like organized notes. And that's it. And that's all I do. And I don't even have a membership. I just use the cut and paste and then I delete it. But that way I'm able to have my thoughts organized, and I do go back and read through every word that it gives me. So it takes something that would take me an hour to do, a report to write, and it does it in 2.5 seconds. And I will tell you that our general manager is a big fan of me utilizing my time better. Like that.
I can tell you that with the help of a Google grant, Dustin Dwyer and some of our coders built a program that we use called Minutes. And what Minutes does is goes out to the public meetings that we can't get to, right? So we don't have a reporter staffing the Holland City Council every week. We just don't have the staff to do that. But what Minutes does is goes out and gets the YouTube videos that cities post and transcribes them for us, and we can search those. So if let's say we're doing, I don't know, sheriff's budgets, a story on sheriff's budgets around the state, we can search those minutes from the communities around the state and see where that's been talked about. And the other thing that the reason I'm bringing this up, the other thing that we're playing with is we're trying to see if we can get AI to write news summaries of what takes place at those meetings. And what AI does not know how to do yet is prioritize correctly. So what it does is the longer a city council spends on a topic, the more important AI thinks it is. So if they spent 25 minutes honoring a assistant basketball coach who was retiring and talking about how wonderful he was, and then spent 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes voting to shut the water system down. Well, AI thinks, well, look, they spent 25 minutes on this basketball coach. That's the top story. And it may not even mention that they closed to shut the water plant down. That's an extreme example. But so, I mean, AI is not there yet. But by the time I retire, it may be able to do my job. I mean, it's very, very fast. It's coming.
How many listeners do you have, and how has that changed over the last 10 to 15 years?
Well, we have the latest, I think I'm quoting this ballparky, but it's around 850,000 monthly broadcast listeners. And that number fluctuates a little bit yearly, but we have, over 1 million folks who are tuning in online as well.
Yeah, but a lot of, we have probably 350,000 to 400,000 regular online audience. I mean, lots of folks will find a particular story that they're interested in a search, and then they're counted, but I don't know that they would call them the audience. The important part, Christa's numbers are correct, but the important part is the broadcast trend, and it is on its way down. And that is not just for our station, not just for public radio, that's for all radio. And part of the reason for that is that those numbers I was talking about before, if you're over 50, you're listening to the radio, and if you're under 50, you're getting all of your news and information and entertainment digitally online. And we're not making any more over 50-year-olds, right? So that number is declining. And what is going to happen potentially to the radio news audience is the same thing that really happened to the classical music audience. It will age out. And so it's crucial for us to figure out how to engage that younger audience and be able to, let me help you, be able to broadcast.
That's plugged in.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm a radio guy, though. You don't need to.
Well, I know. Brenda's going to move this somewhere. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will, while they're moving that, if you
All
can
right.
hear me. Oh.
I apologize to everybody online for that noise. But
Also, I did want to point out to you is that because of where our towers are, if you will, 80% of the population of the state of Michigan lives below my index finger here. And so 80% of the population of the state has access to one of our broadcast signals. So that's huge. Now, if they all would tune in, that'd be great. But they have the opportunity to, should they want to.
With the current administration pressuring colleges, I mean, you mentioned that U of M just dropped the DEI, and U of M holding your license, is that going to affect what you can do and the accuracy of your news?
yeah, I really don't think so. I mean, what the universities are very afraid of is losing federal funding, and for the University of Michigan, a lot of that is their research dollars that they rely on. If we, as Christa said, if we were to lose our federal funding, Michigan public could survive that. We get a very small portion. And I just don't think the university's that worried about us. I mean, they own our license, and so as long as we do a good job, it's good public relations for the university. But they're editorially hands-off. We cover the University of Michigan as kindly and as aggressively as we cover Wayne State University or MSU. And so there's no love lost between our newsroom and the public relations folks at the U of M. But they do own our license, and so they could, if the regents wanted to, they could say, we're done with you, and give the license back, or sell it. And there are lots of, frankly, Christian broadcasters who would love to have our signal. And typically when a public radio station goes dark, that's who buys the frequency, because it's in the non-commercial part of the radio band. But yeah, the current administration is coming after public broadcasting in a number of different ways, but through the university funding is not one of the avenues that they've tried yet.
A comment and a question. The comment is, us oldsters probably don't listen to broadcast radio very much, but Sirius XM is a very convenient source of listening. So I certainly hope that you're aware that that's a channel that can reach us. My question is this. I know you try very, very hard to be balanced and nonpartisan. It appears to me that most of the misinformation is coming from one party. How do you handle combating misinformation without seeming to be partisan?
Great question.
It's tough to do, and I think some of the reputation that we have is because of that situation. I mean, I won't sugarcoat it, right? Our reputation is that we're a bunch of liberal journalists, and some people will say that we're promoting an agenda. There is careful how I phrase this. There is. I wouldn't say that it's a party, but there is a political orientation that has capitalized and put more use to misinformation and disinformation than others, and it's from the far right, and so when we try to combat that, it looks like we are in a battle with a particular party or agenda. But it's not the case. There are lots of misinformation campaigns and attempts to confuse and obfuscate that are coming from the left as well. And we are reporting on those and pushing back against those. I think one thing that makes us appear liberal sometimes is that we do have, our job is to be fair, and we want to cover all sides of a story as much as we can without creating false equivalency. But there are some things in our newsroom that we believe, that we hold as truths, that can put us at odds sometimes with some parties. We operate as if climate change is real. Right? We side with the 97% of scientists who say it's real. Now, you want to argue about what's causing it? That's a discussion that we can have, but it's happening. We believe that racism is wrong. We believe that homophobia is wrong. And so, coming from those standpoints, sometimes it can put us in a situation where some of the stories that we're doing can look like we're at battle with some individuals or a particular party's platform. But what I would push back on is find me the story where we had a factual error, because we're very, very careful to make sure that everything we say is true, and if it's wrong, we fix it. The other thing, I talk and talk. The other thing is, don't get your news get your news from us, but don't get it just from us. Get news from a wide variety of sources so that you can hear what other people are saying and what people who disagree with us might be saying and presenting as factual information, and then you can make up your minds.
One thing I wanted to add is that the other thing that's really challenging right now is, as you have heard, the Trump administration is using the flood the zone approach, right? So we have, any given day, we don't know what the next big breaking news story might be. And so that pressure is really unrelenting right now, and it was that way in the first Trump administration, but I feel like it's more intense with this administration. And then at the same time, we're seeing this pressure on all of these agencies at the federal level to really clamp down on what information they are allowed to give to the media, right, or to the public. And a lot of websites that are being taken down that are agency websites, EPA, CDC, there's something called the Wayback Machine that archives those old websites or those old pages, and so we can find them, and we did some of that kind of reporting in the first Trump administration when that happened, but that is a very intense time right now in the newsroom for that reason too.
Yeah, it's tough to stay on top of it when there is the crisis of the day, and from this administration, that is intentional. That it isn't that it's just happening, but Steve Bannon advised that they need to flood the zone, and he did it with a little bit more of a colorful vernacular. But the goal is that we can't properly analyze and put into context what happened yesterday because we can't ignore the crisis that's happening right now.
But we are trying to do all of that.
Yes, right. Yeah.
We have another question.
Yeah, I realize letting Enbridge sponsor you helps you to avoid looking like you have a liberal bias. However, if you're trying to promote the idea that climate change is real, you're really allowing them to whitewash themselves. And I wonder how much money would it take from donors for you to stop taking their sponsorship?
Well,
I have an answer. I just don't want to do all the talking.
Okay, I can speak to that from two different sides. One, I used to do corporate sponsorship at Michigan Public, so I worked with the different companies. The Enbridge account was not my account, thank God, because we do get almost daily phone calls about it. And what I can tell you is, as journalists are not biased in their reporting because they have to be factual, we cannot, help me out when you want to, cannot be biased with who wants to sponsor us. We can't do that, and that is, I know, it's unpopular, but we have to stay true to who we are as a public media entity, and we may not all agree with everything that all the companies do. I don't like one of the heating and cooling companies that sponsors us for whatever reasons, but I can't not, I can't give them their equal chance to support and be recognized on the air. Did I do okay with that?
Yeah, I'll help you out.
Help me out, please.
So I'll back up a little bit. We are, as a station, allowed to deny underwriting requests, right? And there was a Supreme Court case. I won't have to explain it to you when you hear the name of the case. It was KKK versus St. Louis Public Radio, right? Where the Supreme Court decided that public stations do not have to accept underwriting from every client, if doing so will significantly harm their reputation, or if they believe that it is in the public's best interest not to do that. And so with St. Louis Public Radio, they decided that when the KKK wanted to buy underwriting. Lots of stations have policies where they don't accept underwriting from alcohol companies. Some will not accept underwriting from casinos and lotteries. What you have to do, though, is you have to have a written policy. So these are the rules, right? If your company is a legal company and it does this and this, but doesn't do this and this and this, then we will allow you to underwrite on our station. And so we have that policy, and we can't pick and choose to say, well, yes, this solar energy company we like, you can do it, and Consumers Energy and DTE, my lights work most of the time, so okay, but Enbridge, no. We would lose that battle. The other thing I want to point out, though, is that there's a journalism term called a firewall. We have a very strong firewall at Michigan Public between the money-raising side and the editorial side. So I have absolutely no control, no input, and no influence over who our underwriters are. And nor do they have any control over me. So the public relations person for Enbridge, his name is Ryan Duffy, no relation. But if he were to try to if he were to try to call me and say, hey, we give money to your station, lay off, it would I would be fired if I did, right? I mean, that's how important the firewall is. The other thing that I would say is, yes, it sounds weird when it's on our air, but I would challenge you to find another broadcast outlet in the state that covers Enbridge as aggressively as our newsroom does. Most of the stuff that you know about Enbridge that creates a situation where you may not like them, you probably heard from us. So are they trying to hedge their bets a little bit? Sure. How much money would it take for donors to specifically earmark it to get rid of Enbridge? Yeah, I don't know because I'm not on that side of the building, but I also don't think that ethically that would be a campaign that we should run, because then we're targeting a legal business that by our own policies is allowed to do what it's doing.
Yeah, that's why I didn't bring that part up, because yeah, ethically that wouldn't work. But one other thing too is that in the state of Michigan, marijuana is legal. And when that happened, I was still in corporate sponsorship, and I saw dollar signs for the station because all of these cannabis operations wanted to underwrite because it was a cheap way to market what they're doing, and they were doing a lot and spending a lot of money on marketing, and they have a lot of money to spend on marketing. And until it's federally legal, it is not going to be able to be a part of our sponsorship. So that was that rule. But Vince brought up rules too, and I'm just going to take a little time to explain how the messages in underwriting, I kind of briefly mentioned it, but there is an entire document. And one of the things that has been challenged lately is it's been said that some of the public radio stations are running commercials. So we have two people at our station, our midday host, Mike Perini, and our illustrious, how long has she been here? 45 years? Peg Watson. They are the gatekeepers of what can be said in underwriting messages on the air. And so in order to craft the script to get it exactly to not only satisfy the client, because the client wants to tell people where they can save money, how, come to our sale, we're going to offer 50% discounts. All of that is not allowed to be said because, again, it's a sponsorship and this is a thank you message. So any inducements to act, any references to price, any sort of call to action is not permitted. And there's a giant, like I said, document that we refer to, and Mike and Peg are the gatekeepers, and they will kick it back to you and say, nope, can't put that on the air, rewrite it. And so it's pretty strict as to what we can say. And there's a lot of wordsmithing that goes on. I did get the word joy into one of our messages. It was very crafty. I was really proud of it. Mike wasn't, but that's okay. I won that one. I've lost many more battles.
Well, and the reason she loses is that this is how serious this is. If we break those rules, we could lose our license, right? The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, could say you are not operating legally as a nonprofit or a non-commercial broadcast station, and they could take the license away from the University of Michigan. This is why one of the reasons why the FCC is investigating us in this area, because if they have difficulty on the budgetary side with CPB, they can come after licenses of stations if they can determine that you're breaking your nonprofit status by putting commercials on the air.
Yeah, the CPB funding, we can fundraise and design a campaign and make up that 6%. I'm not going to say no problem, but not a giant problem. But if they go after and they are successful in defunding or providing ways we can't underwrite, that's huge. That's a huge part of our operating budget and our income, and that would be a problem. So we are pretty confident that we've played by the rules pretty well, so we're happy about that.
I also don't want to leave everybody with the impression that the CPB funding is not important, even though it's only 6% to our station.
Oh, it is.
Because the CPB has a very complicated formula they use to decide how much money your station gets. And it's roughly based on how large your station is and what market you're in, and whether or not you can raise funds to sustain yourself in your own market. So we are, by broadcast rules, we are in the Detroit market, which is a big market. And so the CPB says, you can raise the money you need to operate. Here's a little bit, but you don't need us. For stations like the station in Marquette, their percentage of CPB funding is probably more than 50%, right? Because they have Marquette and they have trees, right? And so and the trees aren't giving any money. So for that station to operate, they need a whole lot more federal support. So if the CPB were to go away, stations like us, larger stations, BUR in Boston, BEZ in Chicago, the metro urban stations, the large ones, will survive. It's the rural stations and the smaller stations that will end up shutting down because they rely on the federal funding so much more so because they just can't raise that money to operate in the smaller markets.
I think we've got time for one more question, but I will tell you that I'm not leaving immediately, so after our time is up, I can stay in the lobby and answer questions. Don't forget, if you want to be contacted, let me know, sign up down here. Go ahead with your question.
First, a comment. Follow the money. Because and the other one is kind of a April Fool's question.
Okay.
Is there any crossover of funding between radio and television on PBS?
So
Any crossover funding?
yeah, it depends on what you mean by crossover funding, but I'll explain how it works, and hopefully that'll answer your question. For us, there is not, because we no longer own a TV station. The University of Michigan used to own the public television station in Flint, and then we sold that to another public broadcaster. So for us, there is no crossover. There are stations that are what we call dual licensees. Right? So your public radio and television station in Grand Rapids, the other one that's not us, has it's one organization, one license, but they operate both the television station and a radio station. When WGVU raises money through radio or TV, they can spend that how they want. Right? So years ago, I was the morning edition host at WILL in Champaign-Urbana at the University of Illinois. And the joke there was that radio raised the money and TV spent it. Because television is so much more expensive to do, and the radio station was very successful, and so there was some money that was shifted, but it all came from the community. At the federal level, there is not. So by law, a certain percentage of the CPB money has to go to television stations, and a certain percentage has to go to radio stations, and we're audited how that money is spent. So. Like the television station at WGVU can't get federal money and then feed it into the radio station to keep it operating. So that money is separate. But how they want to run their internal books is entirely up to them.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us be up close and personal with you and answering our questions. Both Vince and Rebecca and Christa have offered to stay longer if you have time and you had a question that they didn't get to or someone did not ask and it is different than what has been asked. Please feel free to come up and talk to them. I think Monthly Program has done a fantastic job of bringing this to us this month on Misinformation. I see heads shaking in the audience, yes, so let's give them a round.
Thank you.
This has been a great program for us, and thank you very, very much. Remember, at the end of April, we will have our May program because we don't have a program in May because it's tulip time. So April 29th will be our next program, and it will be on listening and empathy. Please, if you're interested in learning more about Michigan Public, they're here to answer your questions, or there's business cards if you wish to take them. But thank you. You have been a wonderful audience today. Thank you very much.